Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. We're here to talk about the future of brand and content marketing. We already went through some quick intros as everyone came up, but I would like for each of our panelists to take a minute and just introduce themselves. And I'll kick off with I'm the moderator. My name is Eric Dahan, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Open Influence.
Right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tricia Teschke, VP of Marketing for Centr. We're a health, nutrition, and wellness app by Chris Hemsworth and his team of experts.
Hi, everybody. Allison Mack, Vice President of Brand Marketing for TrueCar. It's an online car buying platform. If you guys live in Los Angeles, you see that ginormous sign off the 405.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zoe Zeigler. I'm the VP of Integrated Brand Marketing at Square. Started as a little white reader. Now we are a full suite of business solutions for small and enterprise businesses, and really working to connect our marketing strategy across paid, owned, and earned. And I lead a really amazing team of brand managers who lead our paid media campaigns.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan Weiner. I lead up our social marketing function and Center of Excellence at GoDaddy. So really get to work across go-to-market, social care, paid social, for our brand objectives, and globally as well. So I have the pleasure of working with some of our international teams, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And I guess to get started, since we're talking about brand marketing and content marketing, let's maybe take a minute to just describe what the difference is between the two of those. And is there a difference between the two of those?
As a person who has had a brand marketing role across my career, content marketing has always been part of my job. And so I think that the best brand marketing, especially these days, is not marketing that delineates between brand and content. It's like brand marketing should be leveraging a strong content strategy to help tell emotionally relevant stories, resonate with your consumers, and really drive value in the hearts and minds of customers.
Yeah, I think our product is our content, so it's more meshed probably than other brands when it comes to that delineation. But I am really excited for where the landscape is going. I feel like the pendulum for a long time shifted more towards very transactional content marketing strategy, particularly because of performance marketing and where people were focused from an attribution standpoint. But I think given the changes with attribution and how brand awareness and recall are really important in today's kind of data privacy landscape. It's a really great opportunity for brands to tell more story and to bring that story back into all content and not just more upper funnel content. And I think ultimately the brands that are doing that are the ones that are winning both in performance marketing and in the brand marketing space.
I would agree with both of my fellow panelists. We actually just had a meeting the other day where we were like, what is content? Right? Like there's so much of it that relates to content, like even our search engine, our SEO things, that's content. So I would say, quite honestly, it's one and the same. That you can't talk about brand without talking about content, without talking about creative, without talking about messaging. So where we said it's one and the same.
That's a really good point. What is content? It's so true. And I think of it as well with titles too, because we're all, not all of us, but many of us are creating content in some form, whether it's social, whether it is an always on video team, whether it is literally the director of content marketing, creating long form ebooks, all these things. So I think it's a discipline that definitely kind of goes across the brand organization. And I think how I kind of think of it as well in regard to, so I guess my argument, by the way, is that content marketing is essentially one and the same, is that, we are, as brands and businesses, not necessarily competing just for share of wallet, but mind share too. So in essence, the attention, engagement, and give a darn, among consumers. And so, it's rather than just thinking, okay, we're in market going against our competitors to, gain affinity, to gain that consideration, that purchase, whatever. We're also competing against editorial entities, against influencers, some of which we may use or have used or so on, because consumers are really out there consuming content And I think more and more in sort of like an inspiration phase rather than just like the pure, I know what I want, I'm going to buy it phase. So I think with that said, it definitely blends together for me.
Yeah, and that's a great call out around, before you could even reach into your consumers' wallets, how do you make sure you're actually getting them interested in that content as their first interaction with the brand, right? And so with that, what are some of the, different strategies or tactics, or just what are you focusing on right now in terms of content / brand marketing?
Big question. Full disclosure, I'm about a month into the job, so still kind of learning the ropes. But also one of the reasons I was brought on was to grow our brand presence in the U.S. market. And I think in order to do that, research is really critical, both for our brand and where we're at, but I think for any brand today, I think the research that we're going to do will help us really understand how to position the product with both U.S. customers, but also within the very cluttered fitness space, what specifically are consumers looking for. But I think the power of research is really, really important to shape any strategy. I know in our kind of pre-meeting, we talked about that, and I think all of us are, in our own way, shape, and form, really leaning into research and data as much as possible to inform what we're doing.
So I can share a little bit about what we're doing in the car buying space when it comes to creating content that is as engaging as possible. So obviously the past couple of years has been quite crazy when it comes to the auto industry and really just all industry in general. But what we've noticed in the past couple of months, so we basically redid our entire content strategy when it came to our social platforms. We were sharing a lot of content previously on our social platform that was about like new, beautiful, sexy cars, right? And we realized that, is this really what people want right now? Because we saw, really the people with research, we're noticing that a lot of people who are buying cars right now are desperately in need of a car, right? So they're not looking for new cars because quite honestly, there's not a lot of new cars out there. So they're really looking for used cars. And also, like I said, it's people who desperately need a car right now. So their income might be a little bit different. Their motivations might be a little different. So over the past, I would say 3 months, we changed the content that we were sharing on social media to gear more towards what people were looking for when it came to car buying. Used, under $15,000, reliable, right? And so with all of that, we saw our engagement rate with the content on social, and it's just all organic, increase 3%. So, I mean, not 3%, 3 times, 3 times, which is incredible. So I think what we really needed to do was focus more on research what the consumers need right now in this present day and constantly make changes that is appropriate.
Yeah, and I think just to double click on that, because that's a great example. What sort of tools did you use, or how did you uncover that insight?
So we did a lot of our internal research, right? We have our insights and research team that was just telling us what people were actually searching for and where they were dropping off and why they weren't purchasing, right? And then we also just quite honestly use Google Trends to see what people are searching for too, organically, and be able to react really quickly to what people are talking about right now.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'm thinking about really as a brand marketer is really how do we think about how all of our channels come together to really, help our customers understand what our business offers, how we can help them as business owners, and how we convert the sales. So what I'm really focused on right now is pulling together a team of folks across my business. So whether it's brand marketing, brand insights, our experiential team, our demand generation team, and really bringing us in all together at the beginning of the planning cycle, the marketing planning cycle for the year, and really thinking about, okay, let's take a step back. We're not going to plan in our channels quite yet. We're going to take a step back and think of, okay, what are the inputs that should drive what we should be doing as a team that's really all focused on driving the brand forward. Let's think about cultural insights that we need to be really focused on and how we connect with those moments in really amazing ways. Let's think about digital trends and what are we learning from what people just want to consume. Let's think about what are those really like relevant events throughout the year that we want to be a part of. Let's think about our product launches and how do we kind of like think about connecting our product launches to some of those bigger cultural moments that will help us drive brand relevance in more meaningful ways, not just brand relevance, but also, connecting down to the lower funnel KPIs as well. So really thinking about how we building a model, a planning model for our brand that will help us like really build into these big brand moments that will help us drive that kind of consumer relevance that will translate into long-term business results.
I feel like I could probably mix up the responses and that would be mine. I think these were all really great. And to first jump off of Tricia around, measurement, tooling, data, and so on, one other layer I'd probably add is listen, listen, listen. So, and I think that is something that can kind of like be on a spectrum of some simple listening, literally just depending on the scale of your business and whatnot, putting your best foot forward, maybe getting a light tool and understanding how are people talking about your brand, all the way to something I was happy to have accomplished with our brand strategy team is commissioning a brand anthropology. I kind of like the word, but it's truly taking listening to the next level and scraping basically end to end of the web, social, and beyond to draw insights around truly what is the conversation being had, where is it happening, how can it be indexed against your products and the customer journey, all these things. And that ultimately is about being empathetic and having a full view into what your customers, your targets are talking about, care about, and thus help inform the content we're creating, our messaging, and so on. So I think like the listening factor among all the sort of cross sections of data is important. And one other thing, just as it pertains to how I like to kind of go to market, something that's sort of a comfort zone for me, and luckily I think is a good approach, and that we use, and that is really just being the selfless host to the conversation of the community and customers. So I think more than ever, we want to talk with, not at, maybe not talk at all. Just again, be the format to kind of spark conversation, spark inspiration. I kind of mentioned that earlier, that being, a bigger and bigger phase for many customers, especially younger ones. So yeah, I think those are a few of the things that definitely influence our decisions in making content.
Can I ask Evan a question?
Yeah, please.
So when you're listening and you share those insights
Yeah.
with, say, the executive team,
Yeah.
is there a culture at GoDaddy of openness to having those insights drive business strategy?
That's a great question. Thank you, Tricia. No, I actually, but really, thanks for tossing that over. So I love data and measurement a lot, and it's not because I'm some like numbers nerd or anything, but I actually see it as a really exciting connector within marketing, across teams, and so on, and really just run by. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So to your point, Tricia, I think one thing to call out is that I think it's important in brand or maybe specific to your channel, what have you, that you're meeting people where they are. So meaning, within marketing, there might be literacy around the KPIs that you're reporting on, whether it's linear TV ratings, earned media value, impressions, so on and so forth. But doing so cross-functionally, it might be understood, but connecting that dot, as you mentioned, Tricia, of like, this is important to our business, it's driving it, doesn't always link up. And I think first and foremost as brand marketers, it's just having the courage to go out and educate and, do your best to prove that this matters. But at GoDaddy, one of the things that was very clear to me is we anchor into formal experimentation, which I think is great, but it's more attuned to, in terms of marketing, maybe front of site, but definitely product and whatnot. So hypotheses, statistical significance, all of this. And so in many instances, it started last year, I met those individuals where they were, kicked off some of our first brand level experiments, And in that way, you're not only speaking their language, because they might even have a little skepticism, a brand experiment, okay, whatever. But again, meeting them halfway. You are instilling trust in your word and just bringing something familiar with a spin. So I think that's a little bit to qualify the measurement part.
Yeah, and I think an important point that brings up is the importance as brand marketers of not just storytelling to our consumers, but storytelling to our executives. As we're heading into a recession potentially. Typically, the first budgets that are on the chopping block are not performance marketing budgets; they're brand marketing budgets. So even before we're like putting together these full annual plans and presenting them to our leadership teams, it's like, how do we take them along on the journey, and what are the proof points along the way to help tell the story with research and with experimentation and with consumer insights about how really filling the cup by focusing on brand is really going to drive performance. Performance alone can achieve direct response, but when we're as brand marketers, we're really looking to drive long-lasting business growth, and telling the story to our leadership team about how really focusing on brand and integrated marketing can have a really direct impact on the efficiency of performance marketing. I think it's something that's like so much more important now, especially in like tech companies like we're in. A lot of us are in it. It's just ever more important.
Yeah, and just on that, I mean, on the sort of breakdown between and the balance between direct response marketing, which easy to quantify, easy to measure, compared to something that's a little bit less direct or maybe a little bit more abstract for some on the brand marketing side. How are each of you kind of managing that balance internally in your conversations in terms of focus, investment, everything else?
It is a nonstop, I would say, discussion, especially with my finance team, because they're always like, Allison, you just spent X amount. When are we immediately going to see somebody purchase a car? Which we all know it takes months for anybody to buy a car, right? So what we've been testing out, and I've been with TrueCar for just about a year now, so relatively new, and for the longest time, it's been so focused on direct response. You're Googling Nissan Altima, here's a Nissan Altima ad, right, from TrueCar. And so now it's definitely, they hired me to do a job where we're trying to build more trust, more awareness, obviously. So a couple of the initial campaigns that I've done is really to start, I would say we call it brand formance, and I'm sure you guys have heard that phrase before, where it's like you're kind of touching both, straddling both lines. So one campaign that we've done is really measurable, where we were doing like a gas giveaway, right? It's like, get pumped about a better way to buy a car, but then also you click here, you enter, you also get to win $20 worth of gas from whatever brand. And from that, we were actually able to see, look, it's not just brand, right? There's this element where it is very measurable. And that was the first campaign that we started to do, just again, to start easing into full-blown brand. So I would say now there is still such an appetite for measurement. Like everything is just very measurable, I would say, more so than, 5-10 years ago. But that's just something to ease basically leadership, to help them, understand the importance of brand, but then there's just still so much you can do where you can measure as well.
Yeah, my personal non-starter is I need to have a tool in my toolbox. So if there isn't a brand tracking tool in place, I'll advocate for it to make sure that I have a way to show the efficacy of my work. So I think, doing that is key. And I've used BrandWatch. I'm currently using Qualtrics. So there's a lot of great tools out there. I also think, working with your CRM teams very closely, in some organizations that rolls up into marketing. In my past role at the LA Clippers, we tracked, every single lead very closely throughout the entire customer journey of how they converted to revenue opportunity, whether that was season membership or single game tickets or merchandise. So I was able to, at the end of the year, say this lead that I brought into the company ended up generating X amount of revenue. So I think that's a really powerful stat as well if you can partner with your data science teams.
Yeah, I think in the spirit of partnership, again, going back to me saying I like data and whatnot, part of when I say that, when we are producing reports, whether it's weekly, monthly for this team, directly for our team, whatever, it's a roadshow. You know, come one, come all. Come listen in, learn, ask hard, interesting questions, et cetera, et cetera. That sort of inclusivity I've found in material ways, and sometimes it's just hopeful, and sometimes it's landed where, you know, you are allowing other teams that might have some of that data that hits a little bit harder in regard to this is driving business or whatever, actually come in and work with you. So, you know, whether it's, hey, we might actually be able to predict churn through social sentiment, or, you know, we might actually be able to understand what an influencer does offline with assisted conversions online. And while it's not happening all the time and not with 100% accuracy, I think we got to over like a 90-day period, like 62% accuracy with that social sentiment and churn of those customers in social. But those things, again, I think it's maybe in that spirit of sort of meeting in the middle. You know, it's like a bit of familiar and I currently care about this, and oh, I see that, you know, what you're producing at a brand level or through your channel is influencing this, you know, in a material way. So
Yeah, and that just makes me also think about how brand marketers, because you know we are responsible for consumer research and insights and social listening and stuff, how we can change our positioning within a company from being a cost center to be like really being added value to help the company make really smart business decisions. Here's what we're hearing people need. Here's where we're hearing like there's breakdowns with our products. Here's, you know, and really serving that as like a way to drive business, the business trajectory and the business, how we plan as a business versus just how we plan as marketers.
Yep. And going back to, you know, staying on top of trends, and Evan, I really liked what you said around listen. The past 2 years the whole world has changed, right? Consumer behavior has changed, you know, just focus, you know, spending habits. I guess, how has that affected each of your businesses? Maybe any sort of example of any changes in strategy to adapt to the new normal world that we're living in?
I mean, what hasn't changed? I'm only like 3 months into my role as well, so I can't speak to, you know, it from a Square perspective so much. But you know, I've spent 4 years at Chase, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we were all about travel and dining, and that was our, you know, I was leading marketing for the Sapphire credit card, and like the Sapphire credit card, when the world is closed down, how do you use it? So it's required us to rethink the entire kind of product trajectory at times, but also as brand marketers, rethinking it's required us to be a lot more innovative. I have really enjoyed over the past 2 years, like not having forums like this, just like spending time on the trades and spending time on LinkedIn and connecting with folks, because that's the kind of inspiration I need. I like to take inspiration from even outside of like the verticals that I'm working in, because, you know, I work in like kind of B2B marketing right now, but like I'm taking inspiration from something Netflix is doing where they're, you know, using their billboard as content. And how do I think of my, you know, kind of out of home marketing more as content? So I think that's one way, like just trying to always, you know, stay up to speed on what's going on in our industry and culture. But also, you know, one example, when I was at Chase, you know, we had two pretty prominent influencers that we had signed on for a year-long contract that were supposed to do in-person events, and how do we change those in-person events to something virtual? But not just virtual events, but how do we change those to virtual events that can actually drive direct response as well? So, you know, requiring kind of signups to, instead of just like streaming it live on YouTube, requiring signups and then using that to retarget from a lower funnel perspective and to like, you know, fill the cup even more for our performance marketing. So just like having to innovate and rethink. I like what Suzanne said in the prior panel, is like, it's all changed. So there's no like playbook. It's like we're having to like build it as we go and like rebuild entire organizations in marketing because it's forever changed.
I can give an example in regards to the change. One is our segmentation has changed. That's a big one. We were really looking over kind of like, well, obviously everyone's moving everywhere now, right? Like we can't really focus on demo. We can't really focus on age. We can't focus on geo, all of that stuff. And so we've actually started segmenting based on, I would say, what people care about, right? So there's things like affordability first, right? There's now a segment that we care about over at TrueCar being like, okay, this is a group of people that's a mix of people, but they care about affordability. There's a group of people that care about health first, right? So then we think about, okay, well, then if they care about health first, that spans a lot of different people, but we're able to focus our messaging on that. There's a group of people that care about society first, right? So that's one thing that we've changed where we look at it that way. And then we, write our value props and our messaging cater towards that more so than what we've done before. So that's just one example of how things have changed over here.
And just a question on that, like with health first, like how do you translate that into content from a car buying perspective?
Buy a car from home and have it delivered. So there's a lot of things that we've noticed that during the pandemic that people no longer really need to test drive a car, right? Like they don't really care about that. That's not number one priority anymore. Their number one priority is their health. And so that has impacted obviously our product and what we need to do, but also changes, like I said, just on the not the surface level, but the marketing side of things. Like people are willing to buy their engagement ring online, which is crazy to me. But then also being able to buy their car online. People are buying houses sight unseen, right? Because if they're moving to someplace else outside of the city, so yeah.
And I also think that knowing we went through an entire segmentation exercise as well, and understanding the affinities of our customers is really helping us to plan our media better. It's not just about what's showing up in the creative of the media, but what is adjacent to the media. That what is adjacent to the branded content and the branded advertising that we're putting out. So having those types of consumer insights is really helping us work with the right partners, figure out the right verticals and things of that nature that we might not have, certain business owners have affinity for gaming. Who would have thought that? And so it's not just about showing up in a fast company, it's about showing up on Twitch or somewhere like that, where your audience is. So, yeah.
Add a final comment. I think the pandemic made everyone so much more conscious, particularly in the category I'm working in health and wellness. I think people are very focused on preventative care, preventative fitness versus results driven, immediate. I need abs for summer. So I think that's really exciting particularly in the fitness and health category. But I think that transcends all behavior. So I think as marketers, it really gives us an opportunity to have honest conversations if from a brand marketing standpoint, you can align those values with what customers are looking for. So.
And in terms of just looking at not just consumer behavior, but also segmenting amongst generation, how have you seen your businesses change in terms of focus on Gen Z or changes within the millennial generation?
I'm as I was thinking about that, I'm like, and then working in social too, I'm like, it's kind of a lot of the things we've discussed amplified in some ways when considering the behaviors, primarily of Gen Z, which you could peg all different kinds of figures against them. They're spending more, they're going to be spending the most, they're, all of that. So there's certainly, a key segment that we're looking at and engaging with. And I think it a bit goes back to my talking about this like inspiration phase. You can tell this is something that resonated with me when I saw this study. I think it was from McKinsey or BCG, one of the research arms. And the interest and intrigue in not brands necessarily telling these consumers, let's say Gen Z, probably some millennials and so on, not necessarily them kind of defining their values, what they care about, what they should care about, but fostering this, Gen Z, these consumers to fostering their own decision. So what does that mean? I think again, it goes a little bit back to fostering the conversation, being the backdrop, being the host to that conversation, rather than working behind, closed doors to kind of define these different outcomes for consumers and saying, here's your menu. Um, so I think, that, and I think the immediate caveat to that, or kind of the flip side to that, is that younger consumers, Gen Z, let's say, are out looking, to have these conversations, looking to be inspired, so and expecting it. I think that's probably the word I meant to use most, is that they're expecting it, from brands. I think we could all agree. Maybe this could even go into the pandemic question, that the expectations from brands have gotten higher and higher to have values, be eloquent, be sensitive, be empathetic, and so on. So I think that kind of those variety of things that I mentioned are more important than ever, and amplified as you get younger.
Yeah, I think one other way that we are thinking about, generations and millennials and Gen Z and such is sources of influence. This goes back to segmentation as well. While we're doing our segmentation, we're not just thinking about, okay, what's our priority? We have 7 segments, and what's our priority segment? But like, what segment also has the most influence on other segments? As at Square, we have a lot of business solutions for restaurant owners. We're finding that a lot of restaurant owners have younger Gen Z folks in their restaurant. And so when it comes to them making decisions about their, business solutions and technology solutions for the restaurant, who are they going to? The 18 to, 29-year-old. And so it's not just targeting the owners of the restaurants, it's targeting those who are influencing their decisions as well. So I'm really thinking of, generational marketing in that way as well.
I guess we have a few minutes here, but just want to talk about creators. We mentioned creators sort of a few times throughout. Zoe, you mentioned an activation regarding travel, I believe, right? But what's the role in your sort of day-to-day that creators or influencers play in the content creation piece?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Very important. We have signed on a lot of user generated content, right? Just so people can share very authentic content with us, because we've been realizing that the Gen Z audience really feel like they're definitely more drawn to that type of content versus the very polished look. And again, this is, I think, from this just the pandemic, where there's just this authenticity that people are really looking for. So, we've been working with our internal creative team to really be like, well, what do we need to do in regards to the creator side? Because there's obviously, a debate about like having beautiful, polished content versus something that's a little bit more authentic and raw. So we've been leaning more towards user generated content, I would say, to really help us tell our story.
Yeah, and I think of creators in 3 buckets. I think of creators as like my internal agency creative teams. I think of creators as those people that I'm kind of partnering with to build user-generated content that's going on their channel and then going on our channel as well. And then I think about those creators who we just may have contracts with. They're not necessarily posting the content on their channels, but we know that they're making great consumer first, social first content, and how do we work with them to build content that we can bring into our ecosystem to tell the story about our brand. Prior to my current role, I was previously in beauty, and that was a big thing that we did as well. Not just thinking about them as influencers, but like influencers are really great content creators. So even if you can't afford them to post about you, think about how you can leverage them to help you build the type of content that will really break through with your audience.
I think that's such a great point that Zoe makes, is that, influencers are, you know, a variety of things. So internal influencers at GoDaddy are very important, particularly for a GoDaddy Pro brand where there's high skepticism about GoDaddy's capability to support web designers, developers, and professionals. And so we have, call it an army, call it, a group of superstars, a bench of internal influencers that have measurably improved sentiment and trust in, a lot of what we're doing with GoDaddy Pro. So leveraging those internal influencers, certainly content creators that are commissioned on contract, nano, macro, all that whole kind of spread is super important. But I just really like the point Zoe made about, influencers mean really a variety of things, and customers included as well. Customers creating content is huge.
And we have a couple minutes here. I guess before we wrap, any sort of key takeaway you want to share with the audience?
Big question. Well, I'll actually comment on the creators question because it was really inspired earlier this week by New Balance when they spoke at LAFC, and I follow New Balance very closely. I'm a customer, and in my work at the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard was one of their partners. So in working with him, I had some exposure to New Balance in that regard. But I think that they just do such a tremendous job with how they approach creator partnerships, and that they are really revenue minded, and really select authentic partners to their brand, and that just shows. I love the Amy D. Leon collection, and I think that's evident in that a lot of other people love it given how high it sells on all the resale sites. But I just really appreciate what they're doing in the space, both from a marketing perspective and a creator and partnership perspective. I think that's a great brand to look to for inspiration.
I would say final thing is collaboration. I think that's kind of like the running theme, whether it's collaborating with other people and other departments within your company, or collaborating with other brands, right, to help elevate your own brand. That's really what I've learned, I would say, over the past couple of years is just collaboration, and it's more important than ever.
Yeah, and I think my last takeaway is thinking about how do you get the most legs out of your content. And I'm somehow conversations always end going back to Beyonce with me. And I just think about Beyonce and her Coachella event a couple years ago. Amazing live performance. There was ticket sales for the actual Coachella event. I think it was live streamed. Her first performance was live streamed. That's another two pieces of content right there. Then she translated that into a documentary for Netflix, and then she translated that into a workout session with Peloton. And so that's 4 uses of the same content in different ways that are all different, generating revenue. And so as I'm thinking about my brand marketing content programs, I'm really thinking about how do I get the most out of it. If I'm putting on an event, how do I capture content there that can be used on social, that can be translated into paid media, that can and so just the leveraging the full ecosystem of really how you can use a program to really generate 360 content that can help move your brand forward is something that I'm really kind of focused on, and I think we all should be as brand marketers.
That's a great example. I'm definitely going to use that.
Yeah, reduce, reuse, recycle. I love that. I love being thrifty in that way. and other teams and finance can be appreciative of that too. One thing that pops into my head, especially when we're having discussions around brand marketing, and there's a lot going on, Web3, metaverse, but probably among functions, some of the sexier things go on in our space. And one thing, and this may be just kind of cathartic for me too, is that astutely kind of assess competitors and what they're doing. And I think what I mean is that, remember that tactics don't always drive outcomes, that we often take outcomes and have those influence our tactics, not always when we should. So I think, if you're seeing competitors going out, entering the metaverse, doing this and that, maybe it's relevant for you, maybe not. but really, I think, be deliberate and thoughtful when thinking about trends to latch onto and whatnot. And ultimately, what you can anchor into is, I'll use it, listen, 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 really go back to truly where your customers are, where your targets, what they care about, and, enter that conversation thoughtfully.
Thank you guys, and thank you everyone for giving us the
you.
time.